The heart of every man craves a great adventure, but life doesn't usually feel that way. Jesus speaks of narrow gates and wide roads, but the masculine journey is filled with many twists and turns. So how do we keep from losing heart while trying to find the good way when life feels more like a losing battle than something worth dying for? Grab your gear and come on a quest with your band of brothers who will serve as the guides in what we call the masculine journey. The masculine journey starts here now.
Boy, were we on a masculine journey last weekend at our advanced boot camp in the North Carolina Boys Academy. We had no idea what a journey that would be.
I sure didn't.
I have to say that if I never would have expected what happened and how God showed up in such miraculous ways, in way that I think you're going to be so glad you tuned in today to hear some of what our favorite moments were, some of the favorite clips we used, and those kind of things. Sam, it was a experience I don't think any of us will ever forget.
Yeah, I think we went in just totally uncertain about, whether that was even going to be the right location. Not that it wasn't a great place; it was a beautiful place, but was it really going to work for what we were trying to do? And you think we'd learn by now not to try to second-guess God, that he has us exactly where we need to be when we need to be there if we just listen to him?
Yeah, and listening to him turned out to be really the key of the whole camp, because he had certain things going on. And tonight in the studio, we've got, I should say today, what am I saying? It's 12 o'clock. Anyway, we got Darren Kuhn and Andy Thomas. And Sam is at the beach. Somebody has to do it, Sam.
It's a difficult thing, but you know what? I make the sacrifice.
Should we change his name to Sam Somebody Has to Do It, Maine? Is that it?
So we started off the camp as often. We if you've been to one of our camps, and we hope you have. If not, when are you going to start? But we start off the
November
camp,
the 1st through the 4th,
right,
in Moxville at Carolina Bible Camp. That's when they're going to start, Robbie.
Oh, good. They can go register now at masculinejourney.org since we have that shameless plug in there.
Yeah.
But we love to start off with masculinejourneyradio.org. Sorry, Sam. Masculinejourneyradio.org. Anyway, we like to start off the camps with a series of movie clips. As Jesus used parables to kind of engage the heart, and these movie clips we feel like reach into men's hearts and get them set in sort of a sanctuary of, God's going to show up. And so, Sam, we kind of picked the Butterfly Circus as one of those clips that we feel like really speaks to, what happens at a boot camp in so many different ways. And it's fascinating because John Eldridge doesn't use that clip. It came from Mark Varner. It was a Masculine Journey original.
It was. Mark brought that to us at a boot camp about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe even 6 years ago now. And that being said, the clip was about this guy that just has a volunteer circus in essence and goes around to communities and just gives away tickets to the circus in order to bless people. He's not trying to make it rich, but he finds broken people who have not yet figured out what their particular glory in life is. And the circus, in essence, is the circus conductor helping people discover their real glory, and you'll hear a comment, their true identity.
So, in order to set the clip up well, there's a character by the name of Will in the Butterfly Circus. His name is actually Nick. I can't say his last name. Anyway, he doesn't have any arms and legs. He was actually born that way. And he had been...
in real life as well as in the circus.
Right. And in the movie, he was in a freak show where the guy stood over at the freak show and said, here's a man cursed by birth, the man that God turned his back on at birth. And this guy had kind of picked up this label. And so they're standing there in this particular clip, and they're looking at the other performers. And what I need to share with you, because you can't see it, is that when you hear the sort of fight scene, here's the strong man in the circus actually in a bar but now he's in his glory as a strong man in the circus. And then there's a young lady who is, a gymnast, and she's dancing, and it's just absolutely beautiful. But what you can't see is, she's a prostitute, and she's gotten pregnant, and she's being kicked out of the brothel. So when you hear that in the clip, you'll know kind of what's going on as the ringmaster is trying to make a point to Nick, who has got a problem with the label.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, what this world needs is a little wonder. Splendid, isn't it? The way they move, full of strength, color, and grace. They're astounding. But you? Cursed from birth. A man, if you can call him that, who God himself turned his back upon. Stop it! Why would you say that? Because you believe it. But if you could only see the beauty that can come from ashes. Wait! I'm pulling it down, I swear I will!
Your problem now. You're no good to me, so get out!
You're good enough for me, Dollface. Here you go.
But they're different from me. Yes, you do have an advantage. The greater the struggle, the more glorious the triumph.
So we had seen this clip at the very beginning of the boot camp. And so if I was to describe, my favorite moment at this advanced boot camp, as Sam had described, we had wanted to do a listening prayer exercise that we really were kind of struggling with. Would this be too far advanced for all these boys that were at the North Carolina Boys Academy? And to explain what that is, there in Hickory is sort of it's part of Teen Challenge, and they have a place where boys whose parents have kind of lost hope, they put them into this program for 18 months. And I mean, they start off with an ankle bracelet on so that they can't run, and it's almost like they're incarcerated, and they're wearing jumpsuits in different colors as they come through different parts of the program. And most of them, unfortunately, were involved in addiction and those kind of things. But
many of them were tricked, quite frankly, into going into the program.
Right, they were almost like kidnapped and brought in, against their will.
And we're not saying that's a horrible thing. It's just that's their reality.
Right, and so they'd been to some of our boot camps before, and many of them had been to 2 boot camps, so they qualified for an advanced boot camp. But wow, would they be able to, hear in a listening prayer exercise was, definitely a challenge. But the reason why that clip touched my heart was that
the more glorious.
Yeah, as we touched these guys' hearts, I was personally overwhelmed by the struggle. I was so overwhelmed with the struggle that I found myself asking God, why could this possibly, how could you, if there's so many stories out like this, it just wanted to make me cry. And we'll go into those in a minute. But his answer to me was, Robbie, remember the clip, right?
Yeah.
The bigger the struggle, the more glorious the triumph. And I started to see what that was. But to set that up, Sam and Darren, I'd love to hear, you guys were the ones that were tasked with, or Sam, when you guys start off on that challenge of doing that, can you share?
Yeah, we had it down, from the onset. Robbie, when we sat down and kind of laid out the agenda, that was one of them that was on there, and it just thought, well, that's obviously what we need to do. It's something that they do at Ransom Hearts Advanced Camp, thinking that we were going to have a turnout of mainly adults that had been there. Instead it was not that. We had about an even number of adults and of youth. And, one of the questions that Darren and I started talking about is this maybe a little bit over their head? Is this a little too risky? Should we really be doing this? And started to do the pros and cons just a little bit. And then we both sat there and said no, because, without a great risk, there's no great reward. And so we just trusted in God and went ahead and did the session, and it just came out amazing.
Yeah. It was truly amazing, and we did, put a lot of thought into it and even prayer into it as to whether or not, do we do this? We obviously felt like God wanted us to do it to start out with, but then we were beginning to question ourselves, and Sam at one point looked at me and said, "I know you're not used to hearing this, Darren, but I think we need to take this risk." It was cool.
To set that up, to give our listeners that maybe, what does this feel like? What does it look like? Well, essentially, they broke us into groups of maybe about 8 to 10, and Sam and Darren instructed us that we are not supposed to be talking in this prayer, obviously listening, and the first thing you want to listen for is, who does God want to speak over? And so the group would begin to listen for who to speak over, and then after that, the idea was, then what does God want to speak to that particular person? And then one of the keys was we didn't know each other. Right.
We didn't know these boys. We didn't know their stories. They didn't know us. They didn't know our stories. Even the adults that were in the groups didn't know each other well enough. So it wasn't like, I could say, well, I'm hearing, Robbie, that God wants to talk to you about your old age. I couldn't pose my way through it like that. And so that being said, it did create a step of faith in our own hearts.
Yes, and I have to tell you that, in my particular group, we had a lot of young men, and they were, in the orange color, which meant that they had, kind of been set back, and immediately when they sat down, you can imagine 14, 15, 16-year-old boys that were supposed to hear from God, they start giggling, and they start giggling out of control, like, and then when one would stop, the other one would start. And this laughing was going on, and and all the time I'm sitting there asking Jesus, what's the next, what's going on here? And do you want me to do anything? And he would say, nope, we're laughing. And so we're laughing, and when we come back, we'll hear.
Yeah, don't miss. Come back on the other side, because this story is rich.
We'll be back. Think about the boot camp, November 4th, 1st through the 4th.
Hi, this is Sam with Masculine Journey. I'm here with my son Eli. We're going to talk about ways that you can help support the ministry. One way, you can go to smile.amazon.com. There's information on our website there on how to do that.
Then you can go to facebook.com, where you can click the donate button, or you can go to masculinejourneyradio.org. Once again, look for the donate button.
Or if you want to mail something in, mail it to P.O. Box 550, Kernersville, North Carolina, 27285.
I am William Wallace, and I see a whole army of my countrymen here in defiance of tyranny.
God has set within each of us a masculine heart. Why? Why did he give you that heart? And what does the Christian life have to do with any of that?
Come join Masculine Journey Radio for a boot camp, November the 1st through the 4th, based on John Eldridge's book, Wild at Heart.
And when might that be again?
That's a great question, Tiny Jim. November the 1st through the 4th. Go to masculinejourneyradio.org.
Welcome back to the Masculine Journey Radio Show. Today we're doing highlights from our advanced boot camp that was at Lake Hickory, the North Carolina Boys Academy Treetop Adventures on Lake Hickory here last weekend. And so when we left our hero, Robbie, and actually I was in a group with Dewey, and we've changed the names of the other participants in order to
protect the innocent.
There you go. So there was a staff member that we're going to call Leo, who was quite a colorful character. He was kind of an old hippie guy. He's very laid back, always got a smile on his face, very engaged with everybody. And, of course, he's sitting there and he's chilling out and he's listening to the boys laugh. So if you're just tuning in, as we sat down to hear from God, like any 14, 15-year-old boy might think, right, you want me to hear from God now? And they began to giggle.
Yeah.
Well, what caused the giggles to really kind of go out of control was that our friend Leo says, I'm hearing You know, at what point I'm going, like we're supposed to be listening for a boy's name and
or a man's name.
Yeah, or a man's name.
We don't know who God's wanting us to pray over. We don't know who
God wanting to pray over, and all of a sudden, you know, Leo is saying, I hear and so I was like, well, Leo, what? And he goes, well, and to know this, you got to take these other boys' names that were in the group, which we're going to call Connor, Tucker, and Parker. And so he's like, well, you know, Connor, Tucker, Parker, they're all ers. And so now the boys are really, I mean, they are.
If I would have been in that group, I would have been right there with them, I do believe.
And so, you know, we begin to try to listen in between the laughs and whatever's going on. And the next thing you know, I think I said, you know, I'm either hearing Parker or I'm hearing Connor. I think I'm feeling one, and somebody else says, no, I hear Connor. And so we begin to think that we're on the Connor trail. And, you know, we begin to listen, but people are still laughing. And you know, all of a sudden, Leo decides to start singing. Not part of the exercise that I remember, Darren. I don't remember.
We did not prohibit singing.
But poor Leo is not the greatest singer in the world, and he was singing.
Nor are any of we. Yeah.
He was singing, "Open the ears of my heart." And so now, if you weren't laughing before, I mean, it was the serious laughter is now breaking out. And so one of the other boys, Parker, says, I'm hearing Lee. And we're like, there's nobody in the group named Lee. You know, it was, now we've heard and now we're on Lee. And so I'm like, well, does anybody's middle name Lee? And sure enough, Connor's middle name was Lee. And so now we're really feeling like, man, like this is something that might be going on. But the laughing does not stop. You don't get, and you know, one of the other adults was sort of a Marine, a little intense like a Marine might be. And he decides that, you know, the laughter is maybe a little, and so he wants to determine whether or not the boys are even believe in Christ. And so he asks a very penetrating question in a very intense way, like, and the boys are very honest, like, well, when we came to camp, we'd never heard of God. You know, this is, some of them were like, I'm not sure this is real. You know, like, what? Okay. You know, here we are. So let's listen and see if we can hear anything. And so I start hearing honor. I hear it pretty clearly. And I said, well, are we not, honor, does honor mean anything to you, Connor? And Connor says, well, you don't know, I'm a bad kid. You know, you don't know me. You know, may I look like a good kid, like, but, you know, I've never been honored for anything. And I said, well, I'm feeling like God's got some kind of honor, you know. And about that time, some of the other boys start saying, well, I'm hearing brave, or I'm hearing noble, and things also that would edify Connor. And so, but the laughter is continuing. And we're trying to hear.
The joy of the Lord, right?
The joy of the Lord's hearing, you know, and all this. And, you know, after we've been at this maybe an hour, and I'm thinking, okay, this has been an interesting exercise. It must have been over the boys.
When you walked back in the room and Sam and I were sitting there and you walked up and sat down at the table next to us, you looked like, you know, the cat that just ate the canary. The weird look on your face, I didn't know whether it was terror, pride, joy, laugh. I didn't know what it was, but man, I could tell there was something spinning inside your head.
So as I'm walking to think we're going to watch Gladiator, you know, as a group, and all of a sudden Connor says, Robbie, can I speak to you? And I'm like, sure. But all I've heard out of Connor pretty much is laughing and, you know, all that kind of thing. And then he comes back and he shares, actually, like, Robbie, do you think I really heard from God? Because I was hearing light. And and I said, well, what would light mean to you, Connor? And he said, well, it might have something to do with my depression. What? I said, are you struggling with depression? He said, well, my mom killed herself 2 years ago. And I said, well, light has a lot to do with depression. In fact, people that are depressed, sometimes they have them sit under a tanning light, and, that may be it. And, we had a seriously meaningful conversation where I said, Connor, you need to get back to that place and ask Jesus, do you love me? I mean, once you get that sense, well, while I'm talking to Connor, and this has gone on for some period of time, up walks Tucker, who had called him Lee. And he's got the same question, while Connor's still sitting there, and he says, Robbie, do you think I really heard from God? I said, well, what did you say? Wasn't it his middle name? I mean, this is stuff I don't know. And had the same conversation with him. Well, this goes on for like 15, 20 minutes. And, we're done. And I start to walk back to see the movie. And one of the guys who is the
Parker.
one of the lead counselors comes over to me and says, no, I got one more that wants to talk to you, Parker. So now remember, Leo had said that there were the Ers, right? So now here comes, I've had Connor and Tucker, and now here's Parker. And Parker's story literally broke my heart. He had been a football player, being recruited to be a D1 player, and he described that he got involved with marijuana. His family got mad at him, friction. He runs away. And after he's been gone about 2 weeks, he get a text from his dad, and the dad says, Parker, we kind of enjoy not having you around, so just don't come back. We're really better off without you. And it was like an arrow through his heart. And shortly thereafter, they tricked him into coming home because they said he was going to get his car back. And as soon as he got there, of course, they almost like arrested him and took him off. And he felt totally betrayed. And he said the first 2 nights I just cried and I couldn't sleep. And the pastor there at the camp had said, you need to write this stuff out. Do you want to read it? And he's handed me this intimate letter that he's written about his pain. And, again, Robbie, do you think I really heard from God? Because I was hearing those things about Connor. I said, yeah, why can't I hear about me? And so, it was more than amazing, but the thing that was just unbelievable was we got these reviews back at the end of and when you read Connor's review, it said, I've never heard anything before except that I was a failure. And in that group, I heard from all those men that God didn't necessarily feel that way about me.
Amen.
And it wasn't just men. Some of the other boys were the ones that
other
also
people in the group
spoke into him. Sam, you had an experience a lot like that as well, didn't you?
Yeah. In our group, Andy was in the group with me, and I'll ask him to share just a little bit of the story as well. But Andy was in our group, and so we laid the groundwork. And, man, as soon as we started to pray, I heard the word Kyle. And I'm thinking, well, I'm kind of the leader in this group at the moment. I don't want to be the first one to throw this out there. So I waited and waited and waited, which seemed like forever. And finally I said, I'm hearing Kyle. And one of the other campers said, so am I. And then Andy said, so am I. And then we had a few other names, but then there were a lot of things that were just said over Kyle that came from God. And so when we went out to meet with everybody else after the session, Kyle came walking up to me and said, well, I want to thank you for, that listening prayer. I said, well, you're welcome, but why is that? And he said, well, right before we started to do it, when you said we were going to do it, I said, I don't believe in God. I'm not sure if he's really there. I'm not certain how I feel, but if my name's called, then I know he's real. Andy, you were standing there for that.
That's right. I was, and that was incredible. I mean, because he was. I mean, this wasn't a guy questioning whether he could hear from God. He was questioning whether God existed, right? And that's how beautiful this was, of just how he, spoke directly to him. And then he got many words. And I think the accumulation of those words, he probably got 2 to 1 to anybody else. The names were called out. So God really had his hand, on that individual.
And Darren, you had a group too?
Yeah, and our group, I mean, it went very much like that as well, and kind of the same experience. I almost immediately I was hearing a particular name, and I didn't want to jump out and say that name, and there was a couple of reasons why, because I know a couple of boys very, very intimately by the names of a couple of these boys that were in my group. And so I just kept saying, God, are you giving me this name, or am I just infatuated with this name because of this relationship I have with this other young man? And sure enough, one of the other campers popped up and said, well, I'm hearing Jake. And I was like, yes, and that was God's answer to not just, me, but also to him. And this was a young man, same kind of scenario, that good young man, had made mistakes. We've all made mistakes. But by the grace of God, any one of us could be one of those guys at the North Carolina Boys Academy. And so here's the thing I want to leave. We could tell you 100 more stories just like we've told you, but here's the one story we need you to know. And if you're a listener today, please just ask God, how can I pray for the boys at North Carolina Boys Academy? Ask God that, wait for his answer, and then begin to pray that prayer as regularly as you can see.
Yeah, that was just a phenomenal honor to see what God did. And when we saw the reviews, it was God. I heard from God for the first time. And people, their faith became real. It was something that they'd actually heard and experienced. Right. And so that's what happens at all boot camps, Andy, right? The Covenant of Silence is where people hear from God, and that's coming up November 1st through the 4th. Go to MasterJourneyRadio.org. Register while you're thinking about it.